soon as you introduce a significant event or a significant piece of technology or a significant advancement in magic, what happens is your agent of change is no longer the main character. It's instead this other thing, right? And it becomes incredibly hard not to introduce opinions and other people's thoughts about whether this thing is good or bad or not.
Yeah.
Right? And so it creates this problem as a writer that I think a lot of writers just don't know how to deal with well.
It's extremely tricky. Like, I can see that because adding this other dimension of time into this whole situation just adds complexity. It multiplies the complexity that we're dealing with, right? So you're going to have anything you introduce, you now need to have an understanding of not just where it is in time and what it's doing, but where it is then going to go and what its natural progression is. And so you've got this thing about like agents of change. One thing that I would throw into that, right? And I'll put this before you as an idea is if your world building has themes that closely tie to the growth and the change in the characters, then you're cooking with gas. So here's what I'm thinking. Arcane. It's on my bingo card for a long time. I can't wait for season 2. Netflix produced it. Incredibly well done, based on League of Legends. And what had happened was they had a time skip between the 3rd episode and the 4th episode. Significant story beats occur, but there's a time skip, and there is some technology that is being developed in the early stages of the time skip that is then expanded upon and has a dramatic impact on the changing world. But this change in the world and the way it's presented closely ties into, one, the main story, but also the individual character arcs that we're seeing. So like it plays a role in the development and growth of all these different characters. And because of that, they're able to display this change in a way that's not just realistic, but narratively really compelling.
So I haven't seen Arcane, but I'm interested. Is the scope of the actual story broad, or is it narrowly focused on those characters and their arcs?
I would argue that it's actually pretty tight on the characters. The world building is sort of incidental around it.
Yeah.
I would argue. I'm sort of like, Dave, did you watch that as well? Sorry, just like bring you in here in the middle of this. Like, what would you say? Would you agree with that?
I think it was pretty tightly concentrated on what characters were up to.
Yeah. But then like the world building itself sort of fed into the conflict really nice.
We had characters that were avatars for different like classes.
Yeah, so
exactly. The world was represented in the cross-section of characters.
And that is the only way to do it well.
Yeah.
Because when you introduce something that has widespread ramification, you have to, as a storyteller, either make the story about the widespread ramification, or you just have to exclude everything else, right? You have to just completely ignore everything else that's happening in the world, even though the changes there are significant, because that's not the story you're telling. And this is where it's tricky, and we start to divide. A lot of times in this podcast, we come together as a storyteller and a world builder.
Yeah.
We're moving towards the same point.
Oh yeah.
In this case, we're almost starting to move apart.
Yeah.
Because a world builder is going to say, no, I want to know what technology does to my world. I want to know what the major ramifications are for introducing gunpowder, or introducing a new kind of magic, or introducing, steam engines. But for a storyteller, that's not what the story is about. The story is about characters. The story is about change. And maybe it's about the change in a city. But if that's the case, then you never go outside of that city.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what they did. They never left the city.
Right.
In Arcane. It was one of the things, and they hint at a lot of things happening around outside. Again, all tied into the characters' arcs, their personal journeys.